lately we've seen a great deal of the disagreements arising between that content delivery layer, whether it's self-created, by Netflix, or the CDNs like Akamai, et cetera, and the last mile has been erupting in public, and the FCC has been starting to take a look. In an ideal world, how should those relationships be determined? Try that one.
So where do you stand on net neutrality?
Is it net neutrality? Is peering net neutrality?
I think the FCC would come up with something and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, the telecommunication markets has its way of somewhat regulating itself for most of the part. And I think if there is a model for what we call co-opetition, I think telecommunication has set the stage for that, and we continue to see that happening. And what is being discussed here is probably because the last mile is being brought into the conversation, but it's something that's been done by way of traditional wide area network services like MPLS and Ethernet, where the routing of traffic, you pay for the quality of service or the routing of that traffic. If it's a voice service, it's enhanced forwarding and things like that. So it's a matter of how that migrates and become inclusive of that last mile, without it raising too much flags as to who pays for that kind of routing, and making sure that it's done in a fair, non-discriminatory way. So I think with time it would kind of work itself out.
I think the capitalist in me will go down the path of assuming that new business models will be born, kind of whatever the FCC does. It really doesn't matter. That they'll make their rules, new entrepreneurs will step in and solve the problem from a capitalist perspective.
Worst case, the consumer gets charged a little bit more because those rules will have to be administered, and there'll be a little bit of administrative charge.
That's pretty much My view is kind of formed by, before Media Extreme, I was kind of in the voice part of the business, and for many years, and the competitive side of the voice business, where, the idea, the analogy to net neutrality was VoIP, and the effect it had on things like, various regulatory things like intrastate billing and interstate. And, you go back and look at some of the things that were going on in 2003, 2004, ahead of some of the regulatory discussions. The FCC really struggled with the issue, and ultimately it came down to philosophically, they agreed with the VoIP providers that carrying it all the way did not necessarily constitute an interstate situation, but there are other stakeholders to take into consideration, like the state regulatory jurisdictions that really kind of governed how interstate was formulated. So, I think ultimately nothing happened after years and years of multiple parties, building up a position on one side or the other about this issue. Ultimately, nothing happened. There's a stalemate that exists today, and my fear with net neutrality is that it's a manufactured controversy that ultimately both sides are going to build up, and it doesn't benefit very many people, but it surely doesn't benefit the competitive side of the equation, meaning the non-incumbent side. So I think it's a very dangerous thing to really kind of look at, in the sense that mature parties can always find a way to work together. We find that a little bit of money goes a long way, in the sense that if you have a commercial contract in place versus a peering contract where no money is exchanged, you get better attention from that party's sales organization. You get better response. You get the ability to provision capacity when and where and in what amounts you want. So that we look at it as a network operator that's new to this game, and we say, well, that's the natural way to do it, because there is value in the underlying network. You should pay for what you're consuming. How it translates ultimately to the customer is the hard part. But I think the idea that we can go to a central body and just rule on this kind of a complex issue is one that is more than likely not going to produce a lot of fruit, like it did like it didn't do with the VoIP world.
In the VoIP world, there's very little traffic. It was really just arguing over it. In the video world, it's a whole different ballgame, and they have a little more urgency, perhaps, to do something. But
at the time in which it was arguing, it was everything, right? It was 80% of the business, and it was a much larger business then than it is in terms of total dollars.
Yeah, true.
But if there is an indicator, I think where things stand right now, if I go back to what happened with the Comcast and the Netflix and everything, the FCC kind of decided and said, look, this doesn't violate net neutrality, and they could make their arrangements if they want to. And they actually went on and struck a second one with Verizon, and that's they're working on that. So and those models are being done by other folks that don't come to the news. So again, it's just a different form of interconnection or pairing arrangement, or the way you place your caching within the network, whether you can go a little bit further in, whether you can stay at the edge of it and just prioritize the traffic as it goes through that network, or do something else. So again, I think we'll see these models evolve and something would work out that is amicable for everyone in the world of competition.